All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here today. So I'm Jeff Wade, co-founder of Crypto World, and we are doing our weekly crypto over coffee today. And we have a special guest, Tommy. Sorry,
Epsenschied.
Yeah, sorry, I'm bad at pronouncing last names. I didn't want to butcher it. But Tommy, thank you for coming here today to speak about crypto real estate, which is a topic that's a lot of folks are asking about what the future outlook is for crypto real estate and how blockchain technology is going to continue to evolve to help this space out. But Tommy, thanks for coming, and I'll let you present. And if people have questions, we'll ask away.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Jeff. All right. Yeah. So today I'm going to be talking about blockchain and real estate. Nice little graphic that PowerPoint threw together for me. Let's see. It could be because that's like a little video thing. If you just yeah. Okay. All right. The video for the presentation, no go. So just a little bit about me. I work with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Alliance Real Estate. Our office is in Clayton, and our team is the Epsenschied Herman Group. So yeah, it's the five of us. My mom is actually right here. She's Ann Epsenschied, the one who introduced me to real estate. She's been in the business for well over 30 years. And so that was my introduction to real estate. And then I discovered crypto. So I wanted to learn how to merge the two. So note, just because I see this everywhere, this presentation is for informational purpose only. It is not intended to be legal or financial advice. The reason I say that is because I'll be talking about a couple specific projects. So I'm really not incentivized or trying to promote these products in any way. So home buying opportunities that are afforded by blockchain. So there's crypto as collateral, which is, financing your mortgage and utilizing crypto. There's a few different ways to utilize your crypto. There's wallet-to-wallet sales versus crypto to cash. And then NFT sales, which is basically that ownership transfer using the NFT vehicle to do so. So crypto as collateral. So crypto loans are still really in their infancy and development. One of the leaders in this space is Milo, and they actually work internationally. They're kind of an online lending platform where you can go on and see what you qualify for. So in their one-to-one crypto collateralization, you'd actually be taking 100% loan to value. So you would be collateralizing $100,000 worth of Bitcoin in order to get a $100,000 loan. The advantage of that is obviously that you get to keep your crypto, but that will be held in escrow for the entire period that you're paying off that mortgage. So once it's fully paid off, you can reclaim that collateral. But with, a standard financing option, you might be able to do as little as 3.5% down if you're doing FHA, and that's not an option in this space at this point. They also have a cap of a $5 million purchase price. They did have a pretty competitive rate, although information is pretty limited. So I imagine that rate would go up or down depending on your credit score and everything that they use to analyze you as a customer. Additional notes for Milo. The currencies that they accept are Bitcoin, Ethereum, USDC, and the Gemini dollar. They have an annual overage assessment. So if, say, you buy or you finance your mortgage in a bear market. If all of a sudden we hit a bull market, you have an option to either withdraw some of that grown crypto or withdraw those gains, or you can pay down your mortgage at a much faster rate. So there's that annual overage assessment. It's actually not an on-chain lending platform. So they're utilizing your crypto as collateral, but everything else pretty much remains the same. It's just giving you that option to, utilize your assets to gain leverage.
Question on that. You have, if the market goes down, you have to
Yes.
collateralize?
Yes. So they give you an option, and that'll actually be on this next slide. So your crypto, so if you're doing that one-to-one crypto loan, your crypto holdings can actually drop up to 65%. And then they'll give you 48 hours to park or to recollateralize, add more collateral to your loan. That being said, it's pretty risky because if your crypto assets value dips below 30%, then they'll manually liquidate your position, convert your crypto to cash, and keep those holdings. So for anybody who's messed around with DeFi, you understand kind of the risks of smart contract lending. It doesn't have as much forgiveness as what we're used to dealing with. Yeah. So
48 hours is a killer.
48 hours is a pretty tight window to add more collateral. Yeah. So it's still pretty risky. In a less risky sense, you've got the home loan expert, who's actually a local St. Louis lender, and now they're national, but he started in St. Louis. They've actually invested a little bit in Bitcoin, and their development in this space is very limited, but they are allowing you to use crypto as proof of assets. So when they're underwriting you as a customer or a client, you can utilize your crypto, which is a small step in the right direction. So they're continuing development and research in this industry, and I imagine they'll expand on that in coming years.
Are they just the broker though? I mean, it is the bank they're working with the ones that are doing the final approval?
Yeah, so they do, I guess, yeah, they do a lot of, they do some in-house lending, but they utilize, government programs as well. So it'll be interesting to see how they would structure their loans going forward if they move into a more crypto-centric lending offering, I guess. So the next opportunity is wallet-to-wallet transactions, and this is really like pure crypto for real estate. So you're sending Bitcoin from my wallet to your wallet, and I'm taking ownership of the house. That being said, you really need to work with lawyers and real estate professionals to understand that title transfer is happening legally, and you're not, and that title is free and clear and able to exchange. So I think it can be a little bit risky to sell to your buddy without, seeking legal counsel to make sure that everything's square, because real estate's obviously a highly regulated industry. So buying and selling homes as NFTs, and this is still wallet to wallet. It's just kind of that next evolution of the wallet to wallet transfer, because you're still sending crypto funds and receiving that NFT, which conveys ownership of the property. And that's that's what I think brings real impact that was not possible before blockchain. It just makes things a little more efficient and streamlined. Right now, it's about a 30-day closing process. You can shrink that window down to instant ownership, which forward-looking might bring much higher transaction speed and probably increased mobility and flexibility for the consumer. So Proppy is one of the companies that's leading the charge here. They've actually executed a handful of NFT sales. Their first was in Kiev in Ukraine, and that was, I believe, in 2019. And that was with a Bitcoin. It was a TechCrunch, I believe, a TechCrunch investor that purchased that condo in Kiev. So a very, crypto savvy person was making that purchase. Anyway, so I guess I want to talk about how you would go about selling your house as an NFT, because as we've talked about, there's lots of title laws that are in place. And so in order to, I guess, get around that at this point, while still remaining compliant, is to actually place your ownership of that real estate into an LLC or other entity. So when you sell that NFT, you're actually selling ownership rights to the LLC, and therefore you take ownership of the property owned by the LLC. But from a title standpoint, the LLC still possesses the property. It's just ownership of the LLC that's changing. This is obviously the first evolution. Pardon?
Say it again, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so because there's like title laws in place, you couldn't transfer title from one individual to the other within such a suppressed period of time, because you just have to make sure that you're compliant with those title laws. And so in order to get around that, you're selling the LLC. And when you purchase the LLC, you then take ownership of the assets underlying that LLC. And in this case, it would be the property. Because it would be the total use of that entity would be to own the property. And if things evolve and there's more government adoption, then that would shift. But this is kind of the first iteration of that.
It's a loophole right now.
It's a loophole right now. Yeah.
So, so if I own my house, I would sell it to my LLC.
Correct.
I would transfer it to my LLC in some capacity.
Yes.
Do you know if there's any taxes involved with doing that?
There's some fees involved with placing your property in an LLC, but it's pretty common practice. Some individuals who are more private like to purchase, their homes as an LLC, or almost all investors will place properties in an LLC just to, limit their liability.
Hide the transaction.
Yeah, either hide the transaction or make sure that, if
Ownership of property.
yeah, and if they have a big portfolio, you might do an LLC for each property. So if somebody, falls and gets hurt on your property, they can only come for that specific house, not your entire portfolio. So that's kind of why you'd structure it like that.
Yeah.
And lawyers also talk about how putting your assets in corporations helps limit your liability, because whenever they're going after, let's say, a case, and there's multiple different parties that they can sue, there's certain assets they can search for, and they're going to create a priority to first off go, do we sue this person? How much can we get from this person? is the amount of money we're going to spend going after this person worth the percentage of money we're going to get back? And do we sue this person or that other person? So there's been a lot of cases where like two business partners, well, basically they couldn't go after the business, so they go after the business owners, the co-founders. One co-founder has all of their assets just out in the open to be searchable, and the other one has everything tied up in LLCs that's not searchable. So what happens is they'll sue one of the co-founders and not the other co-founder. And so what you want to do if you want to minimize your likelihood of getting sued is put all of your assets in some kind of ownership vehicle like that. And if you want to be really smart about it, you can even set it up where you have those LLCs, or even, for instance, put in trusts. You can have it where you don't even, like, if depending on how you're gonna. Now, I'd be curious, how did trust laws tie into all this, or have they gotten that far yet?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I've been asking a lot about is, do you mean like in terms of like an estate trust where you're passing that on to your heirs? Yeah, so those laws will still apply. That would be more back end work where or I don't know, I guess you could maybe build a smart contract that upon your passing, the NFT is transferred to X wallet. But I think that's still that next evolution that I'm not super well versed on. So I'd have to ask more about that.
Isn't that the purpose of blockchain, is to put everything on the blockchain to make it legal or truthful or whatever?
Transparent.
Yeah.
Make it more transparent.
Transparent, yeah.
Yeah. So I think the benefits of having the NFT vehicle, you do have transparency. So like Proppy will put it on a platform. You actually auction off the NFT. So one degree of transparency that's introduced is being able to see each bid that comes in on the property, and not just relying on your realtor to tell you what the bids are. So that's from the sell side. And for the buyers, they're able to kind of set their ceiling price, make sure they're bidding correctly. And then the other benefit of bringing it on chain is that you get to track the immutable ledger. So you can always find who the owner is of an LLC. It's really just documentation saying that my liability is limited to this asset. So there's transparency in watching the way the bids go down and where this NFT gets passed, which can free up conflicts on people claiming rights to a property. I think there was, I forget what, in my interview with Proppy, it was some stat around 7 million deeds in New Orleans still haven't, or in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, have confusion on who the rightful owner is because so much of that title was documented manually. And so if you had it on chain, you could really track who the verify who the owners were. Yeah.
Are there any local governments that have electronic connections into this process? So
Yeah, no, and that is 100% the largest hurdle to making this mainstream. Again, like this is still in its infancy, so one of Proppy's initiatives is meeting with municipalities, local governments, and introducing them to blockchain technology and how it can make their systems more efficient. So yeah, real estate's a very slow business, and government can be a pretty slow business too. So it'll take some time for sure. And that's why there's kind of these loopholes at this point.
So I think to your previous question as well too about the blockchain. So one of the things with having an NFT sale is that it doesn't change the laws of whatever municipality that you're interacting with.
Right.
So, and that's kind of this whole conversation is that you can create, innovative vehicles, but it doesn't necessarily make it to where like title changes any differently in the state of Louisiana, for instance.
Right.
But what you can do, is then make all of those things to your point. Like for instance, like if you put a title and put it on the blockchain, you can even set it up to where not only the title, but inspections, any of the other tax information, you can change who gets access to it based off of the NFT gating. So an NFT doesn't only work like ownership, it works like a key. And so you can change, like, let's say who can see the title, see important information into it. You can't see all the important information until you own the NFT. Or for that matter, in the future here, whenever you start getting governments on board, they can have NFTs where they have, like, for instance, a one-time use. So somebody in the office creates an NFT in order to see information, and it immediately gets destroyed whenever they leave. So that way they can't get back in and alter things, change things, shift over stuff, do anything nefarious. You can do the same thing for inspectors. Like they get a certain amount of time to be able to see certain information, and then their NFT gets destroyed. Their counterparties to a sale, et cetera, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do, but that's all in theory until the governments actually decide that they want to adopt all this technology, which is kind of where we're at. In fact, one of the projects I'm a part of is because there's no legal precedent, like an NFT has no rights. Not really. Owning an NFT has no real rights in the real world unless it's given rights by whatever country. And then if you have two people in two different countries, then its question is who is their rights? Well, it depends on which country, and it depends on if somebody wants to take the case. What we hope for is in the future is that there will be a uniform legal precedent that is created by us, the people, that is outside the bounds of any one given government. That's something I'm trying to build, but for the time being, it doesn't exist. So it has to be, an NFT is an innovative way to show the rights that already happen, that you already have, and give you access to them. Does that help explain it all?
Yeah.
It's confusing.
Yeah, it's a-
I have a question.
Yeah.
She's more confused.
Right. So let's say person who have a property free and clear and be able to open NFT account, not now, but seeking to sell internationally, whoever has digital currency and be able to purchase out of boundary of a country. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So I think that'll be one of the powerful impacts is the ability to invest more globally. So yeah, you'd still have to go through the title and whatever government regulation is imposed on purchasing real estate as a, I guess, foreign entity to that country. But yeah, I think that's one of the big impacts that will occur is at least increased speed for those transactions for international buyers.
This is very interesting.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
To that point, you can do that, and that's awesome, but you also have to recognize too, because it's the actual property rights are defined by the country that the NFT is harkening back to. There are cases where a certain nationality, let's say a Russian national right now an oligarch couldn't go and buy NFT real estate holdings in the United States. Like there's issues with that. So there are cases where certain people in certain places can't do that because of the laws that the housing is sold from, like, as United States laws. And so I think it is tricky there because while we have these cool new tools, I think that there are loopholes for somebody who gains the system.
Right.
But I'm sure Property's working on that stuff.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I talk about. I think it's in a few slides where I just kind of give a general warning because it is interesting if you Google, house for sale for crypto, you can find hundreds of websites that are selling property for Bitcoin. One of my goals is just to meet face to face with the the companies that are providing these services and making sure that the deals are done correctly and that you're not thinking that you're purchasing ownership rights to a property, but really they created 10 NFTs, sold them all for $100,000, so that's why it's important to make sure you're doing your research, meeting with, a lawyer, escrow services, just professionals in the space who can at least notice red flags when they see them and just make sure that you actually take ownership of the house. You're not buying,
So it's a whole
an
new
unbacked NFT.
set of criminal enterprises.
Yes. Potentially, yes, it is. Like much of crypto.
Tommy, do you know of any firms, or do you know of any law firms locally at least that are being progressive, if you will, and working with escrow companies that's similar to kind of move this ball forward?
Yeah, so a lot of Proppy has their legal counsel team. So for a lot of those legal issues, I would be deferring to them. I actually met with a lawyer the other day he's a securities attorney. So he was, determining if this token offering was a security or not. So I do know that there's attorneys in the space working in this regard. I don't have a list of contacts that I could reference for you, though. I kind of defer to some of these escrow service providers to help us through that
Are they a
process.
domestic company?
So actually, the CEO is Natalia Karavenya. I'm not sure her nationality, but I know they're based in San Francisco. So they're headquartered here. I don't know that all the ownership is American, but they're working a lot in the United States. Yeah.
I've used, just very briefly, Cape Sokol. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Local real estate.
Yeah, well, no, an attorney, Sandy
Oh,
Oxman, he's got a crypto practice.
Really?
So I did it, just a brief consulting with him, just to make sure that my mining operation, I had some questions about, when I set up my staking platform, just, is this legal, what have you, and then he just went over all the tax rules, but he has a specific part of his practice is crypto.
So they're niche in crypto.
Yeah, I don't think that's not his sole thing, but when I talked to him, he was very familiar with the blockchain, and the whole Ethereum, from how it's being treated differently from proof of work to proof of stake, and he told me it's no problem to run a staking node because I'm not taking physical possession of these people. They're pledging it, so it's not leaving my wallet. But if I took it, I would have had to have some sort of financial license, But it was pretty good,
So
Yeah.
Let me emphasize what I hear from you is, we do not have a regulation yet. The U.S. government do not have this regulation yet. But lawyers come up with the regulation its own, and they are monitorized how the transaction will be done. It's just mind-boggling because we do not have a solid ground how to play the rule.
Yeah, that's crypto.
Yeah.
That's all the crypto.
Yeah. And that's going to be that's the biggest hurdle and maybe it's both the biggest headwind and tailwind potential for this industry is the regulation that occurs.
But until there's regulation, nobody can say, no, you can't.
Right.
So you just make up the rules as you go. So you don't have to pay taxes. Not too much.
How unique it
We're being
is.
monitored.
We make the law as we go in privately. Wow, so people who do not have a knowledge, they want to be greedy.
Yeah, and that's a big reason why the transfer of ownership exists like this at this point, because you're making sure that you're still legally compliant with all rules that do exist, and they're really not dancing into too gray of areas, because it's really just the LLC ownership transfer that's occurring. And they're positioning themselves to, meet with the right people and kind of just be on the front end of that understanding. Yeah. You got anything,
Just
Corey?
ask questions.
Always. But so essentially, it's a really creative way to sell a business, and inside of that business is real estate.
Yeah.
So, which another interesting, well, there's tons of interesting things to talk about. It sounds like you've got more slides.
Yeah, I'll get to some more. Yeah.
I just recently heard about people stealing titles. Is that, how are they doing that?
Yeah. That is, so I know there's like some spam that's going around where people are calling you to purchase this second title insurance. Most of the time when you do purchase a property, you're purchasing title insurance as well. But I know that there's a scam going on in that regard.
But aren't they going to the courthouse and getting some documentation?
Like home title lock, those
Yeah, that's
advertisements
it.
for
Home
home
title.
title lock,
Yeah.
the home title insurance.
Yeah. And so that, I guess that would be, that's one of the use cases for that NFT vehicle, is being able to verify the owner of that title, and to have it on the immutable distributed ledger, so that there's, no internal tampering, and there's no issues that, like in the case of Katrina, where those facilities were wiped out, and so they didn't have enough backup record keeping for that. Yeah.
So on that note, that's a huge proponent. So whenever you think about people without identification, with improper titling, because that's a huge issue, even here in the United States, but especially abroad, where people don't have driver's license or social security number or title owner, they don't have proof of ownership to things, or they don't have the documentation thereof. By putting it all in the blockchain, you can ensure that only that person can get access to it. And if for something to happen, you can trace very easily who went in, what they did, how they did it, et cetera. And you can set up different smart contract rules, let's say, for transferring over title. So you can have the person who needs to sign off on it have a second or third key. So meaning inside the office, you're going to transfer title. Somebody else has to look at, let's say, here in St. Charles on Main Street, somebody's going to transfer title. So let's say that there was an inside job and somebody was trying to transfer title on something. Or let's just say that they're making a mistake and they're foolish and they fat fingered something, and so transfer some kind of title ownership. Well, you can make certain events like that have a second, somebody take a look at it, go, okay, did this person actually come in, request this, like did the holder of the title? And if so, where did they come in? When did they come in? What's the transaction for? You can track all the pieces on the blockchain and then go, okay, do I approve it or not? And then to that point, you can approve it or not. And then, of course, from a tax perspective, if you're a government, you should be all over that, because nothing's flying through at that point in time that isn't explicitly tracked. Who's the buyer? Who's the seller? When did they do it? How did they do it? Who are all the people involved throughout the entire process? But yeah, you start thinking about, what does that mean for titles? What does that mean for IDs? I mean, there should never be anybody in this country, at least, who doesn't have access to their social security card or driver's license, or can't vote because they can't prove who they are. It should all be on the blockchain.
But there's still identity theft and title theft.
Exactly.
So these people walk into the courthouse, you said, and they just request a form, fill it out, and all of a sudden they have
I
access to
don't
your
know how they
title.
do it, but it's like, like you're saying, what's it called?
Home title lock.
Yeah,
Yeah, so what is home title lock?
that's like
Prevents
insurance preventing.
I
someone
think
from doing-
basically it's almost like kind of like LifeLock for your home title. So you know how like if you ever, I have LifeLock, and I applied for a Lowe's card because we were redoing our kitchen at 0%. As soon as I got it, I got a thing on my phone that said someone's applying for credit on you. Is this you? And yep, that's me, you know, and so for how there's got to be, and I know nothing about titles, you know, but there's got to be some sort of notification that someone's applying for title, you know. So what I'm thinking is maybe you get like a shady home equity person that doesn't require a lot of stuff, you know, and they forge your name and take out a home equity loan, okay, in your name,
Wow.
and then you get a second lien put on your house. So then no payment, the second lien holder can force the foreclosure on your house. Well, it's even worse if you own your house. Say you own your house 100%, no liens on your house. This lien gets put on your property, and then they can force foreclosure on that property. So it's like the note. Yeah, I mean, and knock you out. And I guess there's no, you know, your title insurance just really covers that, yes, you own this block of property, that these are the dimensions of the property, this is the physical house and the physical address, but it doesn't prevent someone from going in there, taking out like a home equity loan or a mortgage on your house, keeping the money, and then you know, you're in foreclosure, but you're not getting any of the letters because they used a fake address, and so you have no idea that any of this is happening. Not to scare anyone here,
No,
you know,
this
no, but I mean
is
that's
How do they do that?
that's
It's like, wow.
that's what I mean. You've heard of that scam.
Yeah.
You know, this story really actually happened to many people in California right before when financial and the real estate market crashed down in year 2009.
Yeah.
It happened, and I read it from the Wall Street Journal. It's not just one or two cases, a lot of them.
Yeah.
And the owner, they even didn't know. That's scary, but actually, is it happen?
Yeah. There are definitely that definitely does happen, which is it's the important part of not cutting corners when you're going through a real estate transaction, because you know sometimes different title companies or any service provider, whether that's your realtor or whatever, just don't do their due diligence, make sure that you're set up with the right checks and balances so that you're taking title correctly. So yeah, those are definitely things that happen. And to your point, like with the NFT vehicle, it's actually another DeFi tool. So if you wanted to utilize it for a HELOC or home equity line of credit, there's an opportunity in DeFi space to do that. But having that ownership transfer, so knowing who the rightful owner is and that nobody can just go in, hijack that, and utilize it.
That's a good word, hijack. Yeah. Title.
Yeah. And so another element that Proppy provides, which is huge in this time period, is completing all the documentation to make sure that the NFT has ownership rights of the LLC. So just making sure that all checks out, again, is just more checks and balances. And then you'd obviously set up the auction date, you'd set up your digital wallet, and then the sale would take place. So seller pre-listing steps. Another thing about the transaction with the NFT, because you're taking ownership instantly, is the seller will actually perform the inspections, have appraisals done, any kind of documentation that comes with the sale, seller's disclosure prepared. Then you'll maybe even host an open house. At least that was the case in this NFT condo that sold in Tampa. So buyers have the opportunity to really know what they're bidding on. And then obviously you'll make sure that title is clear. So right now, one of the steps in that 30-day closing process is making sure that there's clear title on the property. And a lot of times that doesn't occur until after you're under a purchase agreement. One of my transactions actually earlier this year, they had 5 liens on title. So to clear all those liens in that 30-day period, it obviously takes a lot of effort. And that can have some friction as well with just human beings in the process. So you'd want to make sure that title is clear before buying that. And these are those steps that are so important to make sure that the deal you're doing is viable. Exactly. So the buyer steps to purchase. So you get, a hot wallet set up, whether that's MetaMask, Coinbase, etc. And then currency acquisition. So you could get your currency from an online exchange. With the buyers who I spoke with they purchased an NFT condo in Tampa, Florida. And they actually went through an over-the-counter exchange known as Autonomy. So they just wired them their US dollars and received USDC in their MetaMask within a couple hours. And then you participate in the auction, and then transfer of funds occurs at the end of the auction, and you take ownership right after. And that's a big part of why you perform all this ahead of time, is because you trim that window down to instantaneous as opposed to that 30, 45-day closing period. So these are just some examples of some deals they've done. There's that first one in Kiev, the one I was referencing in Tampa, and then this was actually another Florida property in St. Pete, and that one was actually purchased with Ethereum. They're moving more toward the stablecoin use. USDC was used to purchase the condo in Tampa. The reason they encourage stablecoin is just so you're not subject to the volatility of your crypto, and then all of a sudden the auction takes place, your Ethereum, drops 10%, and now you don't have funds to complete the purchase. So some of the problems it solves is just faster, more transparent transactions. The common title issues can be avoided by bringing title on chain, and then just reduced human error and friction. And I know one of the visions that they kind of have is the ability to just go on Shop for Houses and purchase them instantaneously. We're still a little ways off of that, but I think that'll be exciting for just speeding up the market, and with the way travel is increasing, to have that mobility and flexibility when you're, working remote, changing cities, could just really make life easy for a lot of people.
And you do not have to live there.
Yeah. And then the future potential. So I put CBDC there just because, if we do move to that central bank digital currency model, which, I know there's mixed views on that. But if that does happen, then they would most likely be using blockchain at a government level for transfers of ownership. And so that could be something where understanding the technology before that occurs would be very beneficial. And then it'll just increase transaction volume, market efficiency, and then mobility and flexibility for consumers. The biggest hurdles are education of consumers. I know it seems like everybody knows about crypto when you're at Crypto World, but we still might be the 2%ers. And then involvement from institutions who also have vested real estate interest. And then obviously adoption by governments to bring this technology mainstream. So my goals are to educate the consumer, collaborate with service providers, and educate and collaborate with governments, just in the sense of educating them on how this technology works. The first two will be more my focus. But obviously that's a main piece of the puzzle. There's just other people working on that who I'm working with. So yeah. Heads up, this is the warning I was talking about, that there are several websites offering properties to be purchased with crypto. Some may be legit. United States is very regulated. So before selling or purchasing a house with crypto, I recommend you reach out to I or another professional so that we can ensure the transfer of title happens correctly and that you are compliant with U.S. laws. Okay, so.
You mean that I can't buy that $1 million mansion for 1 Bitcoin?
No.
That might be a scam. You're
No,
telling me
it
that?
might be. I don't know.
You never know.
Bitcoin's volatile.
Yeah.
The other realm that I've researched a lot, and I've worked with some commercial operators on deal analysis and things like that. So I'm pretty familiar with the real estate syndication space. And there are a lot of investment opportunities afforded by blockchain that really weren't possible before. So fractionalized real estate, tokenized assets, which is pretty much one and the same, and then secondary market trading. This is a company, Lofty.ai. I'm not super familiar with them, but I wanted to throw them up here because I know they've got some listings on their website in St. Louis. And essentially what they're offering is you can go in and buy tokens for as little as $50, which grants you stake in a property that they've purchased. And so you can buy little pieces. It shows what your cash on cash and IRR returns would be. And it did seem like a neat tool. Again, I'm not super familiar with what they're providing. I did analyze some of their deals. So I know they charge a listing fee of 5%. And then there's a couple other fees built in, which makes their business model work. And then you have the opportunity to get into real estate for as little as $50.
So you're investing in their purchase of a property which you hope they sell for something that gives you a return?
So you're actually investing, these are rental properties. So you're hoping to gain dividends from your investment. So with the $50 investment, your dividends might be pretty light on a property. One of these, this one I went in and looked at. I saw it had sold for $104,000. It was purchased by Lofty's LLC. It was listed for $120,000. So when you're buying those tokens, that's the equity pool. And then, they rent it, manage it, and then you have a say in improvements or anything on the house. And then, you get dividends.
Wow. Seems like they figured it out. They're like, okay, how can we buy a bunch more properties with other people's money and then also mark up what we just bought and then also get, of course, like all things, you've got service charges to maintain the property and then give people back in a way where they're feeling like they're in on the front.
Yeah.
So it's not that it's a bad idea to buy those tokens, but that is brilliant. You're like,
I was on their website and I was like, man, they got this thing figured out, because it was like you have the 5% commission basically on listing it too. The properties are all owned, held by the Lofty LLC. The only interesting thing though is you notice that there's quite a few tokens still available. So I'd be interested in learning more about if they're doing 100% equity is available to the market, or if they're holding some portion of the equity themselves. I'm not exactly sure, but I'd be interested to find out.
Well, since it's a sub business, it's probably 51% that they hold.
Yeah, exactly. They exercise the right to sell. So I just wanted to throw it up. I'm really not super familiar, but it was an interesting tool.
it is a very, very interesting to me is that Warren Buffett, he against cryptocurrency, and here you are.
Yeah, how's he letting me
source-
step out
yeah,
here?
You are working that line.
Yeah.
And here
Don't
you
let
are
him fool
giving
you,
up public speaking and promote us to, come on, engage.
Yeah.
That's against the Warren Buffett.
and
Don't
that's
let him fool
why
you,
my biggest focus is the blockchain technology as opposed to cryptos in particular, and my thought has always been
Did you say that, cryptocurrencies, they are trash?
yeah, I think you did say that. But again, that's why I'm focused on the technology and the opportunity it provides. I think he would, I don't know him on a personal level, but I think he'd encourage research to be done. And at the end of the day, he knows that a well-educated consumer is good, and you want to be the highest level of service for your customers. So
Does your commission come in tokens or in cash?
That's
it's USD at this point, but we're gonna see if we can get that changed. I'd love if it was Dogecoin.
Did you say Dogecoin?
Yeah, big advocate. I'm just kidding. So real estate syndication. So just I wanted to put this up real quickly in case anybody wasn't familiar. So it's basically the burden of like the general partner to go out and source a deal, raise capital. So you'd be selling equity in your development opportunity for say $100,000 minimum buy-in, and they get a portion of equity in that property. And then you have to do the improvement, development, management, and then the exit, which would be either the refinance or maybe the selling of the property. So that's syndication in a nutshell. And when you're selling that equity portion, it's a security. So by tokenizing securities, you're actually bringing a lot of liquidity to this real estate market. So there are platforms like DigiShares, which are actually tokenizing those assets. And then platform T0 is the one that I'm most familiar with. And they seem to be very, from a regulatory standpoint, they're very well in line. And that's their main service provision, is that that you're buying the security in an SEC compliant fashion.
Is this like a right?
Yeah, it's similar to that, but within a syndication, it's typically on a deal by deal basis. So a couple examples of it is like the St. Regis in Aspen. In 2020, they actually took $18 million worth of equity and they tokenized it, which was, about 19%. I think it was more like 18.9% of the equity in that property was tokenized. And then you could actually trade it on that T0 platform. So what's exciting about this is typically the only investors who can buy into a development like this would be accredited investors, which means you have over $1 million worth of net worth, or you make, I think, north of $250,000 a year for individuals and maybe $350 or $400 for couples, something like that. With the 506C Regulation D offering of that security, if you hold it for a year, you can then sell it to a non-accredited investor. So what's interesting about that is, like, in a brand new development, if you're going from ground up, it could take, 5 years before you see any return on your capital. If after year one, somebody approaches you with a new investment opportunity, in the past, you'd have to sell back to the general partner your equity, probably at a discount, because and he has to go through the SEC, make sure that the next investor is compliant, and there's just a lot of friction involved. By bringing on a platform like T0, you go through that KYC process, so your information is stored on your block, and then you can actually trade these equity positions, which wouldn't be possible before. And so that's exciting because it's bringing more liquidity to the space, and it's kind of democratizing this area of real estate that was previously only available to accredited investors. And granted, there are certain offerings that can target non-accredited investors, but it's that trading of them in such a fast way, which is revolutionary from T0's standpoint. And they have to be tokenized to function on a trading platform like T0. The other example of this is the spot at Myra Park. So the spot at Myra Park is actually the first ground up development. And this is to my point of, it might take 5 years to develop, but they're actually scheduled to complete in Q4 this year. Trading actually began in March of this year. So those investors may have invested 4 years ago. Obviously, they passed that 1 year hold period. So then they were actually able to trade those tokens as early as March, even though the development isn't even complete. So it's an opportunity for them to liquidate their position, but it's also an opportunity for investors who are like, oh, with the trend in population, I think this senior living facility is going to do really well just outside of Dallas. This is my opportunity to jump in before it's complete. And Aspen, on the other hand, they were a pre-existing hotel, and then they just pooled up that 19% and tokenized it.
So for the second example, they couldn't sell it to a non-accredited investor because it hasn't been.
No, they could. They just had to have their ownership for more than a year. The development didn't have to be complete.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Do they have for the prison building? Because, Mike Burry, he's the one that, Big Short.
Oh yeah, the Big Short guy. Yeah.
He's the one invests a lot of in real estate, especially for the prison building.
Interesting.
And if it's there that we can invest it in the U.S. prison building real estate companies.
I don't know. That's a whole subject that I don't know that I can touch on. I think that, yeah, that's a good question.
With their platform, anything can be put up there, right?
Yeah, anything could be tokenized. Yeah. I have a hard time believing that they want to make investors in those properties super public, or I imagine not all investors want to be super public on prison investments, but I don't know. There's potential there.
Inside the operation is U.S. government, but building itself, is a private.
It's privately owned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it's not private company; it's a public company. But we can participate in just a new thing,
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I'd be very interested to see if that happened in the future. Right now, they're mostly focused on multifamily and that kind of real estate because it's got great cash flow.
So if the government's paying, you're getting.
Yeah, that's guaranteed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. That's an interest. I'm gonna look more into that. That's very interesting. Yeah, and then the advantages of blockchain. The biggest one, which has been, because I've actually introduced some developers to T0 and their team, and that increase in liquidity is just such a revolutionary change because real estate's just never had that option. And just the versatility, because even if you know it's a good investment, the idea of like, no, my capital is going to be tied up for 5 years can be a pretty daunting investment to make. So,
Well, I mean, with anything, if you can fix the funding,
yeah,
you can fix a lot of issues, right? Like,
exactly.
If we had funding, we could scale this.
Exactly.
So it's interesting what they're looking to do.
Yeah. And they actually had, I think they've tokenized 330 million worth of assets so far. Yeah, they're making strides. Their new CEO was the former CFO. I think I told you this, of Intercontinental Exchange, ICE. So they're making sure that they're compliant with government regulation, which is huge too.
Who's that, T0?
Yeah.
Maybe they can do a crowdfunding platform where
And
Crypto World can be on that.
yeah, and that's what they're
Tokenize it.
that's what they're working on is
Alright.
is actually doing the crowdfunding, or at least I know they were a couple months ago. So that's one area they're looking into. And platforms like that do exist, like CrowdStreet, where you can go in and try to gain funding that way. But that they really provide that trading platform, which is it's like kind of like if you go on their app, it's almost like a Robin Hood or New York Stock Exchange for private equity is what they're calling themselves. Then it obviously brings scalability. So one of and I think bringing this investment class kind of to the public eye is going to not only increase scalability but also competition. So I always think that's a good thing, to make sure that the operators and the general partners are really well buttoned up and that they're really bringing value to the community, because that's what their aim should be. And then the democratization of real estate ownership. So they decrease the minimums, where I know the spot at Myra Park, I think they decreased their minimum buy-in even from a limited partner initial offering standpoint from like 50,000 ahead to under 20,000, which is pretty impressive. And then greater exposure, non-accredited welcome. And then I just threw these in at the end. They were just institutional adopters that I was just looking at recently, where this was obviously big news, was when BlackRock partnered with Coinbase. They passed the private spot Bitcoin trust, and then the iShares blockchain technology. So the reason I point this out is because BlackRock has their big capital providers for real estate as well. So to know that they're dipping their toes into crypto is pretty interesting for the marketplace. Just an observation. And then Charles Schwab is also offering that ETF as of August 3rd. And I looked at kind of their top distributions. It was Riot. Actually, it's interesting. Again, not financial advice, but I noticed Riot was the first one on both of those, was the top position. And there's ICE, CFO at T0. All right, thanks for watching. Here's my contact information. You can find me on YouTube at The Crypto Realtor. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, and there's my phone numbers and email.
Cool.
Do you think this will decrease real estate agents or increase?
Hopefully decrease them and make them better. It's kind of like in the syndication space where you're going to have to be a better operator. My hope is that, with every introduction of tech, kind of like Zillow, a lot of agents were like, oh, well, we've got this catalog of houses we can show them. So now we're robbed of that. Well, now you have to find another way to be more valuable, even though Zillow exists. So even when this exists, you have to increase your value to the market, which I think should be positive.
What's your hope from all of this? Like, if you could get anything from the entire blockchain revolution, your space, what one thing would be the most important?
My hope would it would just really be enhancing the product for consumers. I want increased efficiency and just a higher degree of transparency. And I imagine with that, there'll be, probably some reduction in fees that are unnecessary. So I would love to see just a better product with less hidden fees and less human friction.
What is the fee now for the realtor if you hire seller side of the listing your property? What is the percent for the realtor fee?
So that can vary. If I were going to list your house, it would probably be, and this depends on the house, but it would probably be about 6% real estate commission, which is then
It's not changed
a
then.
portion of that would be paid to the buyer. Oh, you mean with the NFT vehicle?
No, I used to be a realtor, for the 1.5 years because I cannot do it. I always think that real estate agent, there are really different kind of a breed.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't do it.
Yeah. And
I
that
couldn't do it. At that time, it was 6%.
yeah, and that's
So still.
Yeah. Well, I think he's talking more of the fees, like titling fees and fees associated with buying
No,
and
no,
selling
no,
houses.
just the straight realtors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Commission
No,
fee.
absolutely.
But this whole thing just seems like it decreases the barrier of entry for homeownership.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think too, like similar to like Robin Hood, right? They gave it to the hands, all of us, make it easy to buy and sell stocks.
Yeah.
And that's how those guys from the Reddit guys were able to, Wall Street Bets was able to ruin the hedge funds because of the shorts, right?
Yeah.
So the power of the people, because of Robinhood, allowed for that to happen. So I think this type of technology is similar in a way because it gives us the ability to be able to purchase and invest into things that we normally don't have access to,
Yeah.
right? So,
Exactly. And that's one of my large hopes. And yeah, no, I think that's going to be revolutionary.
Hopefully we can get government records on there, like the titles,
Yeah.
Your home title on the blockchain.
Exactly.
I've seen there was like one small town up in Iowa that put everyone's title on the blockchain kind of this.
That's a
Yeah.
wonderful idea.
But if you if like you go down to St. Louis County, and you need a copy of your title or any of the liens on that going in there, if you could have just some sort of private key, hey, this is mine,
Yeah.
and get that would be very efficient.
Yeah. And the other thing about bringing title on chain is we're pretty spoiled here in the United States in terms of like our regulatory laws and just overall stability. If you think about like a country where there could be civil unrest and there's property is taken over by a dictator or something, if that, democratic system is restored, to be able to have a real blockchain where you can verify who the owners of those properties should be, I think that would be pretty, revolutionary. It would change a lot of lives. Yeah.
I think that's going to happen. I think we're very, very, very early right now. But
Things are
what,
changing.
10 years from now, a lot of this infrastructure will build out, and I think they're going to use blockchain for that. But
Yeah.
We would not know how to play game then. Because it's a change so much rapidly. It's my fear.
Yeah.
all right, our time is up. Thank you, Tommy, for speaking to us about this very, interesting, but man, I'm very excited about the future of this technology in the real estate and other industries. But if you want to get a hold of Tommy, I guess we'll just switch over here. if you have questions for him, if you need a real estate agent that's very familiar with this space, or any other real estate in general, if you're just buying a home, I'm sure he can help buying and selling. So thank you, and we do have something to give you. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
We got a Bitcoin book for you, and also a ballet wallet on there for you, so you can use. But thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you.
That was great.
If I like to watch that again today, the presentation.